When. And the sound that just assaulted you was the sound of a turkey, a chicken. I got nothing.
Sound of love.
That's what that's what a rubber chicken's love sounds like. I'm
Yeah,
Judah Buddha. I'm here with Arthur Spooner. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. And thanks to the people at Blamo and our complimentary logs that they have sent us out to sponsor the Chicken Foot podcast.
Yeah, I don't know what
So,
I did with mine.
how have you been enjoying your log?
It's about as boring as a log.
Okay. What kind of things do you do with your log?
Sometimes I hold it and I stroke it when I'm feeling a little bored.
And what else?
What are you trying to get me to say?
Look, we're trying to make money off of all the
Oh,
whitey tidy money that we lost because of you.
sorry.
All right, but we
So
thank Blamo for our logs.
thank you, Blamo. When we want to, if we can, want to suggest to you guys, everybody out there, to go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/chickenfoot podcast, and like our page, and that way you'll be able to see. We'll be able to see when we're about to go live. We have stuff. We put stuff up there. Pretty soon we're gonna be starting. We're gonna start putting some stuff that you won't see on the podcast, like pictures of Joseph naked, stuff like that. It's just
Mhm.
good stuff. Good stuff.
You have to have widescreen, high def.
So so anyways, if you can give us, you can, and subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube /Chickenfoot Podcast, and you will be able to see everything live when it comes out. Of course, if you're watching live now, you probably know that. But
True.
if you're tuning in later, it helps when you subscribe and follow and leave a comment. We'd love it when you guys leave comments and interact with us. Tell your friends about us and kind of build us up a little bit, oversell us a little bit. Because, anyways, we appreciate you guys. Oh, we already got a comment. Padrino. Looks like Judah has used that extra. Hey, I'm going for the, what's his name?
Homeless library look. Oh no! Wait, it looks like a yard sale. You're selling all the stuff, trying to make an ends meet. All right.
What's that guy's name? That he would come in on a helicopter, had the mustache.
Magnum PI.
Magnum. I'm going for the Magnum PI look. Anyways, do you have any funny stories or jokes to start us off?
No, let's just jump right into it. I think this
Okay.
time this is an interesting topic, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of ready to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Well, it's funny because when I suggested it, you're like, that sounds like death to me. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the way you presented it, I was like, wait a minute, is this a joke? Are you serious? Are you trying to take a break from podcasts?
No,
Maybe we can tell our favorite 9/11 stories.
what's funny about that is we do, when I get together with people, nice try. Yeah, all right. Looks like Judah has used, okay. When I get together with people, we do talk about, like, where were you when you first heard about 9/11? But the thing we want to talk about today is self-awareness and a little bit too much. So what I said in the messenger was, hey, maybe we can talk about the last 2 weeks. Both of us tried doing comedy. I thought both of us we got some laughs,
Mhm.
and we're dipping our feet into it, and we're trying to discover what it takes to be better comedians. Because I think both of us work well, sort of doing guerrilla comedy, which on the fly, reacting to others, but doing intentional comedy is a different story.
Guerrilla
And
comedy. I've never heard that term. Is that something you just kind of made up?
What, guerrilla comedy? Yeah, I
Yeah.
just made it up. Yeah,
Okay. Well, that's
you know,
kind of cool. I like that term.
like guerrilla
Yeah,
warfare.
you're
You know.
kind of fun. To me, it sounds like you're fumbling through it. You're just kind of like, like a you see in the movies where the gorilla just charges at you and just burrows through everything. That's it's not
Looking
finesse.
for a
There's no
banana.
finesse. There's no finesse. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like you're just getting through it anyways.
Right. Well, um, the thing that I think we talked about last week, and maybe the we've talked about before, but I think I want to shine a light on a spotlight on it, is about being too self conscious, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about ourselves while we're doing it, and not wanting to look stupid. And I noticed that when I was doing it, I was thinking too much about us. I was being, I was in Judah's head too much, and I realized that my favorite comedy, my best comedy, I feel like, is when I play a character,
Mm-hmm.
and well, I'll do a little accent, or I'll change up and I'll play a character, and I think it's because if it's just Judah, then I'm being judged on the merits of me. But if I'm
Mm-hmm.
playing a character, it's like all that self judgment, because a lot of times it's just me and you, or me and a few people. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like I'm on a stage or anything, but I feel like playing a character from now on. When I do comedy, I want to put a little accent in there. I want to put a little something else in there, uh, and I feel like that's what Andrew Dice Clay. I feel like it's what a lot of comedians do.
Well, it's very interesting you say that because I remember seeing an interview with Jerry Seinfeld, and he said because when you think of his comedy, you think he's just kind of go up there and being himself and just telling some jokes. And he said that he doesn't play himself;
Hmm.
he plays a character. That character might be pretty close to what he's like, but he's not being himself. He's not being 100% him. And yeah, because the one thing I realized from both um, doing like 3 weeks ago when I did the ads thing and it wasn't going very well,
I thought it was.
I was like starting to get self conscious and I was like, oh man, how am I going to salvage this and all this kind of stuff. And then being on the other end where I was listening to as you were doing it and I was trying to like, go with you and riff and roll and because it 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 made me there. Like I was
Hmm.
too present there. I was too
Hmm.
much. Joseph, or I should say, Joseph was too present there.
Hmm.
So I couldn't just be. I couldn't just like shuff it off and be okay with whatever's going on and just keep rolling with it. I started to sweat and started to
Hmm.
like lose my train of thought and my timing and all this kind of stuff. I even lost my wallet, I think. So if you happen to see, it's a leather wallet and it's got like scissors around. So just
Yeah, I'll make sure I return it to you empty. But I think that's why, like, my comedy, your comedy, even Rico's comedy, the way we've done it before has worked easier for us, because it's sort of either making fun of ourselves, but also making fun of each other.
hmm
And that's a lot easier to do, that when you shine a spotlight on somebody else, or if it's even if you're making fun of yourself, it's like you're highlighting certain parts of you, and so that you kind of hide the real,
yeah.
in a laughing, joking way, so you can kind of hide the real side. And what made me think about this the most, actually, I had a discussion on another podcast, but recently I saw two interviews. One with Brian Regan.
hmm
Oh, one was an interview with Brian Regan. The other was this show that Jim Gaffigan's trying to. I don't know. Check it out on YouTube, but or maybe not. It's called something like some kind of. He's trying to do some kind of cooking show, and it's just not funny. and it got me thinking. I'm like, why? Even though he's kind of playing a character, but it's more of him at home. His kids are watching
Hmm.
him, and Brian Regan was just boring in the interview. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating to see. And actually, this now that you mention it, Seinfeld, when I've seen him in interviews, not really interesting.
Hmm.
He's actually kind of off-putting.
Well, it goes when we talked about the quadrilateral. One of the
Mhm.
things is like the surprise,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the thing about comedy. You got to have that surprise, and in real life, you can't always be surprising everybody. You know, that's part of who you are. Is people expect some level of even keel,
Yeah.
you know, and if you're always trying to joke or all that kind of stuff, it's people kind of get tired of it in the
Yeah, it
real
comes across
world.
as manic
Yeah,
if you got
so
too much
you
going.
know, there's a time and a place for it, but it's not every day, constantly. So you know, that's one thing that kind of sticks out to me what you're saying, and I wonder if the other thing is because we talk about common culture is it's almost
Mm.
like you're kind of pulling yourself out of the normalcy culture and making yourself a culture onto your own. So
Almost like a cartoon. You're making
yeah,
yourself like a
so a
cartoon.
cartoon or a
Caricature.
caricature, and so that's part of the surprise. You don't know what they're
Interesting.
going to say when they're going to say it. And I've
Right.
seen interviews with Andrew Dice Clay where they would talk to him like he's the caricature, and then he would get
Ah.
offended. You know, like they talk to him like he's stupid or ignorant and stuff, and he would get upset and he's like, well, what do you think? You know, what do you think? I'm a normal guy. What do you think? I just come on here and I'm just punching people in the face or something? You know, I've
Mm.
seen him where he just gets irritated with the interviewer because they don't separate that caricature. But then again, I mean, his shtick almost comes across as that's him. You
Yeah.
know, 'cause he also dresses like that all the time too.
Well, I saw Joe Rogan talk about how he thought that Andrew Dice Clay, his character, started taking over his real personality. And by the end,
Oh.
he had a hard time distinguishing
Mhm.
them. He was doing it so much. And like you said, he started dressing like it, and it just
Mhm.
started. They started to integrate together.
Well, and
It's
that's what Andy Kaufman did, and he tried
mm,
to say, you know what, I'm just going to be in character all the time, and people just didn't like it. There's no off switch.
yeah,
You know, I mean, if you lived in a real cartoon, you'd probably be like, this is like, you know, it would be exhausting.
yeah. I think there's a word "cloy" that I've used before, and I don't know if it's the right word, but
It's probably not. That sounds funky. Oh, koi. You're playing koi,
no,
like a fish.
cloy. Cloy is different, not a koi fish. It's disgust or sickness with excess of sweetness or richness or sentiment, and so it's like if you eat ice cream all the time, you feel cloy. You're like, you know, it's like too much of a good thing. Too much sugar is usually what I associate it with, and I feel like it's the same way when somebody is always trying to be funny. You know, after a certain period, like okay. You know, it's
Yeah,
like I feel just that like oversaturation. Like let's get rid
yeah.
of
Well, and that's the key, I think, too. Is it's like a two-edged sword on that. You
for
know,
comedy.
yeah. Where on one hand, uh, you have to be in it enough to feel natural, but at the same time, if you're in it too often, it's just kind of off-putting. Because that's the other thing is you and I were doing it. It didn't feel natural. It felt like we were trying to push it, so it
Mm.
didn't feel like us. Like we didn't own it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like when we started. I don't know what kind of advice you got when you started doing like therapy and stuff, but some of the things people would say to me is like, you got to find your own style and how you got to do things.
Your own voice is what I got a lot. Yeah.
Well, I had a voice. People just don't like it. So, yeah, but you have to find your own style.
If you don't have a voice, it's just
Yeah, you're just a mind.
okay.
So, yeah, it is interesting. So, getting into that, it's kind of like when you start improv. Like you were
Well,
talking.
yeah, I've got a story about that. I have a friend who's big into improv, and because
Oh, I got a story about improv.
all right,
We'll
well,
save
real
it for
quick,
the last.
it's mine's not as funny as it was. Just it, we tried doing it. It was when I first started Not a Show, and I was like, you know what? Let's do a Not a Show and let's do improv. And first, it started off nightmarish because he couldn't get the link to work, and they're like, okay, we'll just FaceTime. But then I couldn't record FaceTime. Like, okay, we'll just practice, and we just got on FaceTime. And I don't know if you've ever used FaceTime, but it can be awkward. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles that what we're using has now, and it's just kind of and I didn't know you could turn it sideways, stuff, all this kind of stuff, and so I was I was already irritated with this example of a banner. Thank you. Bells and whistles. and and so I was already irritated, so I wasn't in a good headspace. Like usually when I'm best at comedy, especially that kind of thinking on your feet comedy, I need to be jolly. And so I'm like, okay, let's do this. And that's already the wrong approach. It's like, let's do this. And then it was hard doing it not live. I've done it live before and done okay. Doing it on video, it felt there was an extra added element of a disconnect. It seemed, another thing is two things. One, when I did the stand up, it was a little bit weird because I'm talking to a camera. I'm not talking to people.
And you only got one person respond.
Yeah, and the more feedback I get, it's like a feedback loop where I feed off the feedback.
Yeah.
And it gives me energy. And so without that, just talking to a screen, you're using a different part of your brain too when you're talking to a screen. So it became sort of a nightmare, but it ended with, so he's homosexual, and so we started doing this one bit, and he's just like, go with whatever comes up. And I was doing I was just pretending to be a girl. And I was like, let's go watch, I forget. It was like, oh, let's go watch, we're at a Britney Spears concert. And he's like, oh, okay. And then it got real gay. And all of a sudden I was like,
I stumbled into something.
I'm like, I'm just not feeling it right now.
I feel uncomfortable.
Because we're playing girls, right? And he's like, oh, no, you said Britney Spears concert. That's red flag for homosexual. I was like, oh. Yeah.
What are we going to do next? Hump?
It was
humping?
Oh, come on. but so it just, I don't know. It's not the same as when, especially just two people. I often feel like good improv, you need several people kind of coming in and out.
Well, it's also interesting that's how you can see all these comedy movies come out, and they're just not as funny because in the moment they probably think it's funny. Everybody's in the room, but it doesn't translate through the camera well.
Yeah, that's true. Like when you're there in person, there are things that it's almost like you feel a spirit. You feel you get something in a glint of an eye or something that we miss like 80%.
Yeah, because they could be doing outtakes and stuff, and there's a mood of humorous things going on.
Yeah.
But then the edit and the way the movie goes,
Yeah.
it might be like you have a serious part, and then the humorous part comes in at a point where it's like, it doesn't really fit well, or sometimes it does fit well, and so sometimes it's like the placement of the humor, the editing has to be really done well,
And done in consideration. Like it almost
yeah,
has to be done with the comedians there, so they can be like, no, don't cut that part out. That's really
yeah,
important.
yeah, and yeah. So I think that part of the improv is the surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Rico says there are a lot of takes to a scene that might diminish the humor.
Yeah, that's true. If you've ever done filming, I have, and you try to keep it funny, it's like by the seventh take, it's kind of like when I came to, after getting aggravated with the thing, I just
Mhm.
wasn't in a funny mood anymore. And after, yeah, that is true.
Yeah, that
Takes
is true. That if you say something that's funny,
is in the
and
moment.
yeah, and then the next time you got to say it, and you've got to try to make it put as much effort into it, and it's on it. That's probably the difficulty of doing acting. Like drama, you can still stay in the mood,
Yeah.
but humor, like, is part of it is the surprise.
Yeah,
And
a big part of
improv
it.
allows that surprise. So if they keep improving new lines, then
Yeah.
you like that's what Ryan Reynolds does in the
Mm.
Deadpool. He improvs all these different lines, and so it makes it new and fresh. Uh, but if you had to keep saying the same line,
Exactly the same. Yeah.
and
I've
you're
seen. You've seen the outtakes of The Office. They will keep saying this, and it keeps. They get tickled because it's so
yeah,
funny. A lot of it is the characters and stuff like that, and that's why I think comedy works well with shows because you're building characters and you're building relationships,
hmm
and like we talk about a common context or culture. And but movies, it's like you got an hour to do that. So it's like wham bam bam bam,
hmm
and just it's hard to find a real good comedy movie by comedians.
and I think movies, the storytelling in a movie is different than TV shows. So TV shows,
Hmm.
like The Office, you have the Jim and Pam story. That's overarching over long, so you get a little sprinkling of that main plot,
Hmm.
and so you can have all these little stories within each episode. Whereas a movie, uh, you have to have that plot, and so those little stories in a TV show build the character for you, so you get to
Yeah,
know the character. Whereas a movie, you got to keep touching back to that plot point, and if
yeah,
that plot point isn't always the foundation for who that character is, then I think you lose. Like Bridesmaids is a good one where the plot point is not her getting married, but
the
it's almost like
relationship.
the relationship between the friends.
Hmm.
And so it's a constant back and forth. And every
Yeah,
time you see one of them, they're always talking about uh, their loss of the relationship
yeah.
or the greatness of how it used to be
Hmm.
or the ostracization of somebody else is in there and now it's kind of not the same. So those are some of the this is a good topic to mine again,
Yeah, I think we
come
should
back
come
to.
back.
But
Yeah,
right now,
I'm sorry you got
story
cut off.
time.
What? Oh. I've always wanted to do that to people, and you did it to me. So, do you have a good story? You said you had a story about improv.
Improv. Did I ever tell you when Brenner and I took her to see improv when she came to visit?
No.
So people may not know my old supervisor in the Navy. Her last name is Brenner. right? Danielle Brenner. I call her Yelly for short. Because people will call her Danny, right, for short. And I was like, well, she yells a lot, so I'll call her Yelly. I'll use the last half of her name, and I call her Yelly.
I like that.
So she came because she's from Illinois.
Oh, okay.
And so she came to visit family, and before she flew out, stayed like a night or two with me here in Chicago, and I took her to see Second City. Did I ever tell you this story?
I think I did.
Okay.
This is coming back to me. Yeah.
So, and I took her to see Second City, and if somebody were to tell me, like, try to think of a system that would be the worst suggestions for improv that you can ever think of, in a million years I would never came up with this. Million years she came up with the worst suggestion for improv ever.
Because they were like, give us a topic, give us a topic.
So, for example, in improv, they were up there and they were like, we're stagehands for a concert, say like Aerosmith, name a band, right? And she would do, but her and I, we had been drinking already.
Oh, no.
Right? And I splurged so we can get tickets like at the stage. I mean,
nice.
It is like the stage is right here. You got a little table where your drinks sit, and they're all there. So they're literally right in front of us. And Brenner is loud. You've met her.
Yelly.
Yeah, Yelly is loud. And when she drinks, she gets loud, and she's very boisterous. And so she's laughing, and you can't avoid her, and she's sitting in the front. So every time they would ask for suggestions, what she would do, she was so drunk that she would repeat the suggestion that they gave as an example back to them, and she thought it was her idea. So they'd be like, hey, we're at a concert, and we're at an Aerosmith concert. Give us a name for another concert. I was about to say Justin Bieber, and she goes, Aerosmith. And they're like, another band. And she's like, Aerosmith. And she's yelling it at them. And so she did it like 2 or 3 times. And then they were just ignoring her. And I was laughing so hard because I thought, not in a million years would I ever be able to come up with this system.
Yeah.
And then I saw an episode of SpongeBob, which, I mean, I don't really watch kid shows. So I happened to find it, and it played off the same idea, and I was laughing so hard. So Squidward was, I think of Squidward, he was psychoanalyzing SpongeBob.
Okay, so you said psychoanalyzing Squidward. SpongeBob.
And so he would say, say whatever comes to mind when I say this word. So he would say, blackness, and he would say blackness. He would say chicken hand. He would just repeat back the same thing that he would say. So I just thought it was hilarious because it just reminded me of Brenner.
That's funny. Oh, man. Well, we're reminded by Padrino.
Mm. Yeah, time's up. Well, everyone, please like, follow, subscribe us on YouTube and Facebook, and please make all your checks out to Chicken Pod Footness Cast.
Try again. Dude, this is how they're gonna make the checks to us. Don't screw this up.
I'm not making it funny. Oh man, this is the worst. Okay, I got.